Well, hi there, it's Matthew Blades, and welcome back to another episode of Learn from People Who Lived It. If this is your first time here, we're really glad that you're a part of this podcast. Our goal is to help you feel less alone and to encourage you to talk about it yourself and move through these difficult situations in a meaningful and high way. I'll explain what I mean by that here in just one second. And then finally, when you're ready, share your story with us, because this podcast was born on the premise that we can learn from people who've lived it. And I just believe so fiercely in what we're doing here. And so again, this is kind of my long-winded way of saying thank you for being here. I'm happy you're a part of today's podcast, because we're going to shake down anger a little bit in this podcast. We're going to talk about yoga as well. We're going to talk about this shamanic breathwork experience that Dr. Dave and I had. And we're going to do it all with our friend, Lauren Bernard. She is a yogi and has a brand new podcast out called NurishU, which is freaking-tastic. That did not come out right, did it? It's really good, and you'll see why. She's just got a peaceful way about her. So let's go. Let's jump into this episode of Learn from People Who Lived It. And as soon as it wraps up, I'll explain what I mean by moving in the highest way.
Find Learn from People Who Lived It wherever you get podcasts. Search it using all one word. Learn from People Who Lived It.
Welcome to another episode of Learn from People Who Lived It.
Hi, I'm Lauren Bernard from Chandler, Arizona.
Lauren, what story are you here to share today?
I'm here to share a story of remembering who we are. That the essence is never lost, no matter what sort of transitions and changes we're going through in life.
Okay, who do you hope hears this?
I think women in particular, in stages of transition, young women, mothers, but really anyone feeling lost in their identity, their purpose, their clarity about their direction in life.
Okay. Well, I'm really fired up for this conversation. It was postponed due to my mom's passing and funeral, and I'm really excited to get to know this woman a little bit more. So welcome to our podcast. Dr. David Lycan is here. He's up in the top right. Hi, sir. How are you?
Matthew, it is a pleasure as always to be here.
Yeah, Dave and I just came off a super incredible shamanic experience that we may have to talk about in this podcast, because man alive, was it remarkable. But let me get to our guest. Yeah, it was awesome.
I would love to hear about that.
Let me get to our guest. She is Lauren Bernard, and she has a podcast out. It's called NurishU, and it is fantastic. It is one of my new go-to podcasts every single week when it comes out, mostly because I love the people that she's talking to. But as you guys are going to experience while we get through this podcast today, there is just a peace and an ease about Lauren. And she's one of those people that when you're around her, your heart rate just drops a little bit. And I wonder how much of that is natural for her. I wonder how much of that she has to really work at. And I'm sure some of that stuff's going to come up today. But Lauren, welcome to our podcast. I'm so happy to finally sit down and talk to you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to talk with you. I'm obsessed with podcasts, especially now that I feel like I'm in this world. And as a former teacher, or just a teacher in my calling, teach yoga now, but as an educator in academia, I do think this is like the newfound way of the best possible learning out there. So I just thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you, and it imparts so much wisdom. So thank you.
Yeah. All right. Giddy up. Dr. Dave, we're in for a ride today because I know this about you, Dave, but you started practicing yoga like recently, within the last couple of years, right?
Yep. That was a new thing for me.
Tell me a little bit about what led you to that and why you do it and what you like about it, because I happen to have this super disdain for yoga that I hope we can clear up during this podcast, but you first.
Well, my wife had been doing yoga for quite a while. And when I attempted to retire 2 years ago, I had free time, and I just made that a part of my regular practice. We were going 3 days a week. Actually, my wife kind of broke me into yoga a couple of times before my first attempt at retiring, and it was just restorative. So nice, easy way to get into it at the end of a long day at work, and just kind of relaxing and doing some mild stretches. I'm like, yeah, I could do this. And then slowly started to up my game a bit. But for a while I was going 3 days a week. For right now I'm back to work, so my schedule's not as flexible, but I hope to be getting back to that schedule again soon. Maybe
your schedule should do more yoga. That was a joke because you said my schedule's not very flexible. It's a terrible, terrible joke. I mean, clearly it went over your head. I was like, yeah, sorry about that. Did you get it, Lauren?
I got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
She didn't react, though. You got to go back and watch the YouTube footage. She didn't even react. That's amazing. All right. Well, listen, let's jump into this thing a little bit and get to know you. And I know you because our kids are in a hockey program together. I coach with your husband. And so, I've been able to be around you kind of on the periphery a little bit for the last couple of years. But who are you from like 0 to 10? You know how we love to start on this podcast. Like, what was your childhood like?
Well, I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska.
Really?
And yeah. And I am a child of a home with 2 houses. So I think I wrote a poem about it once in school. So my parents divorced when I was really young, 2 or so, and that's all I really knew. And so we had these 2 distinct parts of our family, and kind of alternated holidays with one side of the family and the other. There wasn't a lot of intermingling between them or a lot of communication that I was aware of. But in that way, there was a lot of love, a lot of magic, and just a lot of great extended family members. My parents, I saw them both as single parents very much. And I have an older sister, 5 years older than me. So 2 of us spent a lot of time outside, just a lot of time. I mean, in the 80s, isn't that what we did? 70s and 80s kids drinking out of the
100%.
Garden hose and whatever, come home when the street lights are on. Otherwise, you're annoying. I mean, I don't think it was annoying, but I just.
Oh, I'm pretty sure it was.
Okay, you understand. So, the thing is, I felt very at home in nature and playing down by the creek and climbing trees and digging in the dirt and being messy and sweaty. I love that about my childhood, or hanging out with my grandfather in his garden, learning to cook with my grandmothers. And that's something that is deeply a part of me still to this day, and with my mom as well. But I definitely saw the struggles of what single parenting is like. And my sister and I did our very best to help out with that. And that teaches you a lot of skills that also can become problems later on in adulthood and in relationships, right? So out of that survival can come a lack of clarity in your purpose, in your identity, in your own knowing who you are, right?
Would you put your own spin on that, Dr. Dave, about that, especially that last part about how kind of what we experience shows up later in our adulthood? Because you just have such a beautiful way of kind of shaking this out.
Well, the thing that jumped out at me, just as you were saying that, is when you're put in adult roles as a kid, not entirely, but you're taking on some adult responsibilities as a kid. Sometimes it creates difficulties with setting boundaries later on as an adult. Mm-hmm. Either you feel responsible for things that are really not yours, or there's different variations of it sometimes.
You hit the nail on the head. Yeah.
What do you mean by that? So I'm going to poke that with the needle.
Well, you just see how much weight there is to bear for a single parent. You see the challenge of trying to work all day, provide for that household on your own, take care of the household on your own, manage your own emotions along with your children's lives, ups and downs. And so there isn't as much room necessarily for you as a child, and not out of their, my parents are amazing and I have a wonderful relationship with them today. And I would say that it's due to their own ability to continue to be curious and to learn and to forgive themselves. But it's mostly due to my own ability to forgive myself, to continue to ask questions and to continue to want to forgive. And I think sometimes that can be the missing piece for some people who've maybe grown up with what I've grown up with. It would have been very easy for me to just be a victim, to blame, and to have terrible boundaries and let people take advantage of me the rest of my life.
Yeah. Can I ask Dave to just jump in real quick? Dr. Dave and I have this 6-week wellness course called Revive and Thrive. And one of the weeks that we focus on is forgiveness. And there are different types of forgiveness. And don't you feel like this is a perfect place to kind of talk about those things, Dr. Dave? It's like, so go ahead, because forgiveness is multi-layered, multifaceted. And for some people, it feels like it could never happen. Not in 100 years could I ever forgive this person for what they did. But go ahead and shake that out a little bit.
Well, a lot of times if somebody is still in your life, forgiveness might involve like having a conversation with them and trying to reconcile things from the past. But one of the things that jumped out at me here is, with an adult understanding, kind of looking at what your parents were going through at the time, to me, the most appropriate level of forgiveness is just kind of let it go in your own mind, and just say, don't force them to necessarily confront their own struggles. If you see that they're doing well now and that they've made personal growth, just accept that for what it is, and be willing to kind of let go of any hurts or resentments that might still be there from the past, because you see their efforts. And to me, it would be easy to just say, let's just build a relationship from where we are now, instead of kind of digging around where things are.
That's precisely it. And it's so important to just be in the now, and even without all of those experiences of mine, I wouldn't be who I am today. So you can also be in gratitude now for all that it shaped you to be.
What I find interesting is sometimes the things that you are forced to struggle with as a kid give you the ability or a sensitivity as an adult that you would have otherwise not had to deal with. So for instance, dealing with maybe an angry parent, you kind of learn how to read people. You learn how to read their emotional state at the moment. You would never have that sensitivity necessarily if it weren't for as a child, kind of out of survival, like having to figure out how to read the room and figure out, what the state of things is. So, things that are, mildly traumatic or difficult as a kid sometimes develop a sensitivity that later on almost becomes like a superpower.
Exactly.
100%. It's one of the things I said to my mom when she was passing. I said, you did perfect. And I really meant that. Like, all the bad things, all the good things, they mixed up into a pot. And I feel like I got the best mom experience I could have. I wouldn't have told you that 10 years ago. I was still angry, mad, still really in the shit. And I was, still playing a little bit of that blame game. But in the final years, it was not the case. And I can't even imagine my mom's passing, still carrying that stuff and holding on to that. And man, if I've learned anything through this experience, and Dave, you can probably speak to it too, because I know you lost your father, but man, for the people who have an opportunity to make things right with their folks, or at least let it go, or at least forgive them while you still have time, my God, like find a way, a way to do it, because you won't regret it.
Yeah, no, it's so critical. And like you were saying, you just wanted a little bit more time. And that's how it is. I think once you get to that place, it's like, oh man. And so for me, it's like, there is a sense of like, I want to make up for some time that I have lost in some ways, right? where I did distance myself or just circumstantially was distanced. And so all you can do is be here and now with what is. And so it does require some work sometimes, but do the work. It's so worth it.
Yeah, there's also a natural progression too, just as a child growing into a teenager, growing into a young adult. The natural process is to break away from your family and start your own family, right? So that's a mildly violent situation, right? You're having to wrestle away from the control of your parents and find your own voice in the world and figure out how to do things for yourself. That's a turbulent process. There's no easy way around that. What can happen sometimes though is in that struggle, holding resentment against your parents and kind of looking at the way that they did things and kind of feeling maybe almost a little contempt for it. Some of that is necessary to get out of the nest, but once you get into your 20s, try to get past that and look at bridging that gap again, because your parents, I think most parents want to continue to have a close relationship with their family unless they're dealing with things that they haven't reconciled with. So I really have an appreciation for that now in my 50s, looking back, of what my parents went through when they were younger, and that they were just trying to get through from week to week, and going through it myself and looking back on it. It gives you a very different perspective on it. But by all means, go back and try to build that relationship.
I want to ask you, Lauren, because I know you separated from your mom, or maybe you guys just weren't as close for a few years of life. And now that she's back in your life, because you've said a couple of times you have a pretty good relationship with her now. I think it's important to articulate, like, we're not saying that you're necessarily going to step into this relationship with your mom or your dad that like is all bubblegum and rainbows and it's perfect every time and you just can't wait to see them the next time, and it feels like the long goodbye every time you say goodbye to those folks. But you can find, I believe, a place where it feels really peaceful and it feels really good and it feels like you're working on things. And I don't know, I think that's possible. So how would you describe it from your vantage point, from somebody who literally, I mean, we're going to learn from somebody who lived it right now. You have a better relationship with your mom. What does that mean?
Honestly, it's like the most fulfilling thing ever to have the conversations we have now, because it wasn't easy initially. And I think she'd be fine with me sharing this, but you have to come to a place where you really, like you were saying, Dr. Dave, like you put yourself in their shoes almost eventually. Once you reach your 20s, you have to be able to look and see that they did the best they could with what they had. And that is always enough. So what it looked like is my parents ended up having like a custody battle. And then my dad got full custody. And so my sister, a soon-to-be stepmom, my dad and I moved to Arizona, and my mom stayed in Nebraska. So there was a great deal of separation. And just logistically, it became challenging. Teenage years, like you were saying, like there's like this, you got to survive on your own, stand on your own 2 feet thing that happens. And it's turbulent, it's messy. It can be just challenging for all parties involved. And I was very independent and very, I think, just strong-willed and driven in my own endeavors and pursuits. I was very active as a gymnast when I was young, and then broke my arm pretty badly. And then I was into dance and cheerleading.
Hold on a second. You're going too fast. Did you break your arm while you were doing Did you break your arm while you were doing a thing?
Yeah, I did.
What happened?
I was on the balance beam and doing like a flip series, and my foot just barely missed. And they teach you how to fall, but this was unavoidable. I kind of like twisted and caught myself on my arms, and it was twisting while it broke. So it was gnarly. Like your wrist, the mobility you have in your wrist was what my forearm looked like. Right down the middle, I shattered like an inch of both bones. So I have metal plates and screws in my arm. And so this happened about just a few months after I moved to Arizona. with this like huge life change. I was in 6th grade. So, and it's interesting. So I've done quite a bit of EMDR therapy around this particular injury. Okay. And at the same time, it's almost like it was this actual fracture in my life. Yes. And the fracture in my body is what we sort of uncovered in my subconscious. And it was incredibly healing. And I was able to have a really great conversation with my mom. And this was in the more recent years. So if we backed it up to like my early 20s when my son was born, that was, and I think even I did some traveling. I did a study abroad in college, and I had kind of a moment there where I sort of like really for the first time started to consider what it must have been like for my mother. And just like the profound empathy that I had even without the discussion. And then little by little interactions, we had those relationships. We had those conversations, slowly building through the practice of like letting it all go and understanding just the perception each one of us had at that time, because it was kind of hard to know amidst that situation. So it was a beautiful process, but it did take time. And so that's what I would say is like, just be patient and work on yourself and be as open-minded as you can with anyone that you're working on forgiveness. And sometimes people aren't ready to even rebuild that relationship. And I'm sure that can be hard and a whole other thing. But she was always like, I think, waiting for the time that it would rebuild, and knew that it would eventually. We had a beautiful, solid foundation when I was younger. So, I just have always known her heart.
I want to spend the second half of the podcast kind of, okay, so we set this up, right? It's like, here's who Lauren is. Now we have a really good understanding of who she is, what she's been all about, what the struggles have been like her whole life. And seemingly now you are, as we all say, doing the work, and, you're teaching yoga now, which is fantastic. You've got this new podcast, which I could put up on the screen for everybody on YouTube. It's called NurishU. That's it right there. And it's just fantastic. And she's talking to all these super interesting people. And if you're like into human design, and if you're into yoga, and if you're into like incredible, fresh, what are they called? Mocktails?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like delicious recipes. Like, she's got a cookbook. I mean, this woman is really doing some cool stuff right now. And I'm a super fan of it. And so now let's spend the next 15, 20 minutes talking about, what does the work look like? This stuff's a process, and you don't just get to, now we got a good relationship. Like, that takes a lot of work. Yeah. And so, Dr. Dave, I'm going to ask you to come in first, and then I want to go to Lauren. So you have the first word on this. If somebody's starting to repair a relationship with whoever it is, what are going to be some of the ingredients in that salad?
Yeah. Well, thanks. You cued me up perfectly, because there was a thought that came to mind just as Lauren was finishing up before. You have to at some point become okay with your own pain. Right? So you kind of deal with hurts from childhood and disappointments. Your parents let you down in some way. Maybe they did things that hurt you emotionally. Beyond forgiving, you almost have to become okay with it. And then from that platform, be able to find the grace to be able to extend back to them and kind of welcome them back into your life again and develop a relationship with them.
Yeah. I love that. And do you see that? Do you see the fireworks go off on my screen? I love that.
Fireworks. Yeah.
That's so important. We don't say that enough. Like, hey, it sucks and it's going to be there. And so in some, like you say, Dave, like when we experience trauma, big or little T's, it goes on your permanent record. And then what I like to add to that is, so you better become okay with the sound of your record. You better learn to love the sound of your record, because it's going to keep playing and you're going to just have to figure out a way around it. Like, that's such an important ingredient.
As I get older, my relationship with pain has changed, both physical pain and emotional pain. And I find I have more of a willingness to just accept it and turn toward it and just embrace it and say, okay, let's see where this goes, and not be afraid to experience it. It's different. I mean, I think when I was younger, I was probably more apt to try to avoid dealing with pain if I could. And I think that that's probably where a lot of people are.
That is, I think, really where my work comes from, is from this experiencing quite a bit of that discomfort, the uncertainty, the unsettledness, confusion that is the internal pain. And then I also had this like actual physical pain that was this like broken arm situation, which was a long ordeal. And still I have like kind of chronic pain. So it's interesting because that's it. You learn, you have this pain. You somewhat maybe don't even understand the mechanisms of it because we are suppressing it, and we're constantly as humans seeking pleasure. And especially in our today's world, we're all about finding the next comfort and the next pleasure. And really what growth is all about is being uncomfortable, experiencing discomfort and unpleasant experiences while being able to remain tranquil and open to it, to what it can teach you. And so I learned that through yoga at a very young age.
Can you expand on that a little bit? Because I want you to try to even drill down more on that. Because what I heard, and what I think people who are listening to the podcast heard, were like, you need to just feel like crap. And that's not what we're saying, but it is what we're saying. Like there's both are true. So I want to keep going on this.
Yeah. I mean, I think, so I finished out my high school, like very athletic, very straight A student, got all the honors, did all the things, checked all the boxes of perfect person, and got a scholarship going to college. And the athleticism kind of went away. I didn't pursue that in college, but it was a pretty strong structure in my life. And so this is something I kind of talk to parents about, like that can be a slippery slope for kids, going from all like 110 in your involvement to having like minimal structure going into college. Because what I ended up, and there were times even, I would say like throughout the last couple of years of high school where I just, I was also like finding alcohol is a great way to numb the pain. Also finding great company and like connection that I could be myself with and let down some of that like driven perfectionistic tendency, and just kind of be myself a little and be accepted and embraced in that way. And then I get to college and I just felt like I got a couple months in and I was like so numb, like seeing the world in black and white, didn't know who I was, where I was going. I had gained all this weight. I was like just totally lost, didn't even know what I wanted to major in. I love to study, like I'm here, but I'm living in a dorm. I don't like my roommate, like totally lost, fumbling. And so my second semester had to sign up for classes again for the spring semester. And I was like, I need this elective credit. And there was yoga listed on the list. And I was like, I think that's stretching. I think that maybe I need to get back into my body. That maybe could help. Somehow intuitively, I knew, because I had done a lot of, like, I'm a person who needs to sweat every day to feel like alive. Like I'm very much like, let's embody this experience. And I love like flipping around was like my thing as a kid, just loved like moving. So I get into this yoga class and it was horrible. Like I was like, I'm terrible at this. Oh my gosh, like my mind was so activated. I was so critical of myself. I'm looking around, there's this like bendy acrobat girl in the front row and she's amazing and poised. And I'm like, oh, I'm never going to be her. And just like hating on myself the whole time. All the while, I end up leaving the class feeling freaking fantastic. And I'm like, oh, like the sky is blue, literally. And I just noticed like the palm trees in the wind. And I was like, shit, I've been missing this. Like whatever just happened to me, I feel like I've finally arrived at college. And I just felt more like myself. So the beautiful part of that class is that it wasn't just the physical practice. It wasn't just fitness. We had a manual. It was legit. We learned, what is yoga? Where does it come from? Oh, it has all this ancient lineage. It's 5,000 to 6,000 years old. It's not just about the body. It's about bringing together all that makes you a human being, your physicality in your body, your mental and emotional body, and your spiritual essence. And the practice of these intentional postures, the breath work, the meditative aspect can help you tap into who you are. And it blew my mind. It just blew my mind. I was I'm a very curious person. I love learning. And I've always been a very good student. So I would just ate it up. And it was exactly what I needed in my life. I had some just various different moments of extreme clarity and felt like a divine intervention and a guidance in my life. Like, it was life-changing. It really saved me, I think. So from that point on, I like to say, like, yoga helped me see in color again. And so I've never left it behind. I just continued to stick with it. I practiced lots of different kinds of yoga. So for 24 years now, I've been at this, and it's been an evolution throughout all the different stages that I've been through. It ebbs and flows with different types of practices. I fit in what I can with what my schedule looks like. It kind of has evolved. But about 8 years ago, I would say like about 12 years ago, I almost did a training to teach, and the schedule just didn't line up. But then about 8 years ago, it was like I was shoved in that direction, basically, is how I felt. And even in the training, I was like, I'm doing this for my own personal growth and spiritual development. And I'm obsessed with yoga. So like, I would like to study it even further. And I don't know if I'll teach. Maybe I'll offer it for free to teachers in a school where they really are stressed out and need this. And then here I am, still teaching it. It's incredibly gratifying.
Yeah. The piece that really grabbed me was when you said experiencing tranquility through the pain, or experiencing tranquility with the pain.
Yeah.
The pattern that I've seen, because I've dealt with a lot of patients that deal with chronic pain, old injuries, back injuries, what have you. Typically when you have an injury, like you break an arm, there's a process, right? The thing happens. You get it fixed, there's a recovery period, and then you're good to go, right? So, and that's what people typically expect. But when you're dealing with a chronic injury or pain that just doesn't want to let up, you kind of get into the holding pattern, waiting for it to get better enough for you to move on with your life. And when the pain is still there, 6 months, a year, 2 years later, at some point, you have to allow yourself to get to the point of becoming comfortable with the fact that pain is always going to be there and it's always going to be a part of your life. Yoga and some of the breath work that takes place with yoga, you're learning how to redirect your mind away from the fact that you're having pain and away from the experience of pain into something else, into other physical sensations in the body, being aware of your position in three-dimensional space, being aware of the color of the sky and what's around you, breath and what that feels like.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to just jump on all of this and say, when I was going through my retreat, one of the things I really came away with was pain and discomfort are there as a signal, and they're there as a signal so that you'll do something about it. And, it's why we get angry. At least that's kind of some of the stuff that I picked up in my retreat. Like when anger shows up for me, it shows up so that I will do something about it, because that emotion is telling me this is important.
Right. When somebody's trespassing on your side of the boundary, that's where anger comes in. It's to reinforce the boundary. Now, what you do with it is a different story, right? But the fact that anger is there, it's because of a boundary violation.
Right. I would agree. I would say, like, yes, it's there to communicate to you, but to react is where you have to tread lightly. Yes. How you respond to it. So one of the things I often teach is, this is one of the biggest gifts, is that to welcome that pain and that discomfort into your experience as if the same attention and observation that you would have to something that is pleasant can you just allow yourself to witness it? So like, I like this analogy that if you were a second grader at the zoo and you were asked to like take notes for an assignment and observe the gorillas, you're observing. You're not necessarily offering stories that go along with this. You're just saying what is happening. It's from a neutrality. It's from a space of equanimity. And when you can welcome all of the experience within you, internally and externally, into that space of neutrality and just witness, pause. So you witness anger, you watch it. What is the sensation? What is the color? Without necessarily attaching a story to it or giving a reason, a justification. That I think is where we always get into trouble, at least in my experience. What I've watched unravel in me is when I can just pause, let it, especially if it's an emotion that I'm witnessing, because, you know, the emotions really can't be trusted. They're just energy. They're just energy passing through. It's not something that you always need to react right away. So anger is information. It's definitely it's a communication, but of what and how you respond is really important. So once you can be with something like anger, it will actually pass through if you're really with it very briefly, 90 seconds or so. And what happens is you can watch it. So this is like a practice of like the restorative yoga practice. If you're holding a posture that's a bit of a stretch that's quite sensational, but you're there for 5 minutes. And so you're not just experiencing the fascia stretch, you're also experiencing all these mental, emotional fluctuations. And you're having to be still with it, and it's uncomfortable. And so what you can do then is just, again, you come back to, like you said, your breath, the mindfulness of like, I'm in this sensation, I'm safe. You signal safety through little cues that we offer. And in the process of what you're doing is you're letting that sensation, the non-physical sensation, it just unravels. It's like this natural unraveling. And all of a sudden it's welcome. The anger is welcome in my experience. And what I choose to do from here on forward can come from that place of neutrality and peace.
I just wrote down how to handle anger. I love her breakdown on anger. Yeah. And I timestamped it because I thought, man, this is why you showed up today, potentially, is for that lesson right there. So Dave, I know I could see you just do. Yeah. So pile on, man, because this is a great lesson for me and everybody else.
Yeah. You touched on what I learned early on as a therapist's trick, right? Because, you know, any therapist that's doing psychotherapy with a patient is going to have people that they like and that they feel like they're connecting to. They're going to find people that they dislike for whatever reason. And you learn early on that just because you feel a certain way or something's bending your needle, you don't necessarily react to it. You just kind of take a step back and observe it. Like, hey, why did I react so strongly? Or why did I feel like such an urge to, like, you know, get this person out of my presence? Or why did I feel this urge to, like, go out of my way to do something that I don't typically do for people, right? I'm being drawn in, you know, and so the idea of not immediately reacting, because 90% of what we do is on autopilot. So all day long, we're immediately reacting to things, immediately making decisions about things, judgments about things. And, you know, and some of that is necessary. But when it comes to relationships, being able to put that pause in and saying, just because you're angry doesn't mean that the automatic reaction maybe that came from childhood is what you need to do. You can put a spacer in there, sit with the anger, allow the anger to dissipate. And guess what? The thing that needed to be dealt with can still be dealt with once the anger is gone. Now you can sit through and think rationally what makes the most sense to build the relationship out, to maybe reconcile, to maybe reestablish a boundary. Like, whatever needs to be done can be done after the anger is dispersed. But it's more for you to gain control of your own emotional reactions and not be held captive to it and feel like just because you feel a certain way that you automatically have to respond in a certain way.
Right. You can't trust the way you see things when you're turbulent. You just can't. The only way you can really trust it is once you feel calm and neutral about it. And that can take a lot of practice and self-awareness and work. And one thing for relationships too is like, you got to sit with that for a little while. And why is it that you feel this space between you and another person where the anger is present? You know, what is it about them that, you know, so if you have that sort of internal reaction, like you wouldn't mind if they learned their lesson, you know, the list can go on and on, right? You have to understand, close the space inside yourself first before you interact and try to like confront and work these boundaries out or have a discussion with someone, because otherwise you're only attacking the relationship from this old space inside you, wherever that's coming from.
Right. And many times it ties in with childhood.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Dave, you said something a second ago. You were like, you said, don't react like you would have when you were a kid. And I love that you kind of articulated it that way, because I hear this a lot from people that I would deem angry folks. They utter some version of this sentence. They say, if I would have done that when I was a kid, right? And there would have been some huge repercussion there. And because of the way that it would have been handled when they were a kid, they're still doing it that exact same way in their adult life in every shape and form. Like they literally carry that relational programming all the way into adulthood because they're always in that mindset. They're like locked there or something. I don't know. You can tell me or the psychiatrist. But it's like they're locked on that pattern of, oh man, if I don't do it like this, somebody's going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a tough thing to break. Those patterns are deeply ingrained. And that's why yoga has the ability to also impact you in your nervous system. So these things that are living in these patterns are actually hardwired. So sometimes it's just the somatic experience being in your body and, unpacking a certain place in your hip. And then you start to realize what's actually unsettled and being held in the physicality of your body that might start to present itself, like you said, just in that information, what's coming up. And, it's just it's so cool, because I think the biggest thing I wanted to share in my message is about that it's more than just fitness. And there's an incredible lifestyle. I mean, the totality of the yoga system, there's the physical practice is one aspect of 8. So that's something that I would recommend if anybody's interested in that to grab the book called Living in the Light by Deepak Chopra. It's one of my new favorite articulations of the 8 limbs of yoga. It's got a nice modern twist on it. And I'm actually thinking about doing a book study on it as an offering to help take people through the process, because it's a really great tool. Yeah.
Another thing that's useful about that too is the generalization of the process. And what I mean by that is, so let's say you're in a yoga class and you're being asked to stretch in a way that you haven't done before, right? Maybe assume a position that you haven't taken before, right? So there's something that you're reaching toward. It feels physically uncomfortable. Maybe your leg is starting to shake a little bit because you're holding it for too long, right? But there's an intentionality to it, and you're intentionally standing with some level of discomfort for a period of time, and learning how to do that. Well, the generalization is, hey, I did that in the class, right? On the way home from the class, some guy cut me off and I got pissed, right? Now, can I sit with that discomfort without flipping him off? Right. So that's the generalization part. You kind of learn how to take discomfort in manageable levels, learn how to master it, because the more you do it, you start to get good at holding the positions. And then you need another challenge to, take the position to a different level. Right. But you learn how to manage discomfort and how to not immediately withdraw from it or react to it.
Precisely. Yeah, we call it practicing off the mat is the hardest practice, especially in parenting.
I studied Buddhism for 8 years, And somebody in one of the classes was like, what's a good way to practice Buddhism in regular life? And I'll never forget the Geshe said, you can literally practice Buddhism just trying to parent your children. Like your kids and that experience will show you and teach you more about who you are in this lifetime than anything you could read in scripture or any dharma or any of that crap. Like the way you grow up with your children and the experiences you have, that in itself is an incredible teacher. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
The best personal growth and development out there, spiritual development. And it's free, sort of.
Free. Is it free though? I just toured 3 colleges and I'm wondering if it's free.
See this gray hair right here?
Yeah. Right. All right. I want to wind down just a little bit and talk for a second about something Dave and I just experienced last week, because I suspect you've tried it before, done it before. Have you done any shamanic breath work before, Lauren?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I lead a women's circle.
You do?
I do.
Okay, yeah. This is so cool. All right, we're going to connect to all of, like I told you, man, there's like cookbooks, there's podcasts, there's mocktails, there's recipes, there's so much going on. It's awesome. So we just tried the shamanic breath work. Well, it was Dave's first time, it was my second time. And both times I was so blown away by the experience that I had and what transformation took place. I don't know. I was trying to work that through. But Dave, at our last class, man, you said something that I thought was so profound. You were like, dude, I just found a superpower. Yeah.
Yeah. I felt like I unlocked a new superpower.
About the breathwork patterns you did.
What's that?
Can you tell me about the breathwork patterns you did? Do you remember?
It was
how
just
you asked to breathe?
Long breathing in, long breathing out. Just rhythmic breathing in and breathing out.
Yeah, for a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we did like that was kind of the pattern for a long time.
Breathe quickly. Yep.
Yeah, and then we did 3 and a hold. And that was pretty euphoric. Okay, thank you. Yeah. My cat wants to be involved. I'm sorry. But that was the breathing pattern.
But just doing the regular breathing pattern, there just came a point where I just had this image in mind of that took me all the way back to some things from my childhood, from high school, and kind of dealing with negativity and I imagine myself breathing in the negativity, right? Which seems kind of weird. Like, why would you want to breathe in negativity? But it was almost like I became like this filter that as I was breathing in the negativity, I was converting it into love and joy and exhaling it out in front of me. And the more negativity that I breathed in, it made me stronger in a way. And I felt empowered to like take that and just push it forward as light and joy. It was just weird.
Shake that out, Lauren. Alchemy. I know this is your jam. And this is one of the reasons I love your podcast, because you talk about stuff like this. So go ahead, shake that out.
Yeah. And what was the experience like for you, Matthew?
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Did you want me to elaborate on that? But I was just curious more about your experience.
Oh, nobody cares about my experience. Go ahead. Yeah. Talk to us about shamanic breathwork and just like what you know about it and why it's so powerful. And then, I'll tell you what happened to me.
Yeah. So, I mean, breathwork in general, in traditional, like what I teach the most is a vinyasa style, which stems from an ancient practice called Ashtanga, which I think I talked to you about, that I think that would be a nice fit for you to try. And so in that class, we use what's called just an ujjayi breath, which is a vigorous, consistent, like metronome, like breath in and out the nose. Okay. But there's so many other awesome techniques that you can use, and we'll incorporate those in little pieces in like a basic class. But then when you go into like these workshops where you do a lot more intense breath work, and I practiced Kundalini style yoga for quite a while. And in that practice, there's also a little bit of movement, but the first couple times I experienced it, it's similar to what you were saying. There's just these really different breath patterns and you almost feel high.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely, like, the euphoric place, like, it does take you a little out of body. And having experienced child labor, I would say there's a similarity where you're just, it's that somatic, the soma is the body. You're just literally letting the intelligence of the body get involved. And that's where a lot of this amazing subconscious work can unravel. Things that your body is just communicating directly to your consciousness. It's pretty profound. And you don't have to ingest anything. You just have to breathe, this natural, God-given tool. It's always there for us in every season of life. It's literally the one thing you have control over.
That's how I would, that you asked about my experience. I'll give it to you for the people that still are here, which is to say that for me, it's that euphoric, unbelievable feeling. Like, listen, I've tasted plenty of different types of drugs and experienced plenty of different types of highs. And I can tell you that the high you get from breath work is uniquely different and almost, I'm just going to leave it at that. It's uniquely different. And I find it to be a really warm, great place to be. I almost describe it like I'm being plugged into an electric socket or something like that. And, my breathing slows and I just feel so peaceful. And, it takes a little bit of time. I settle into, sometimes my back will bother me a little bit or my hip will bug me a little bit. I kind of have to settle through and work through that pain a touch. But once I do, I just find so much peace in it. And I actually came home. I didn't tell you this, Dave, but I came home after our experience. And the next day, what was going on? The next day, my wife was out with some of her friends and I went to sleep by myself and I was like, screw it. I'm going to try that practice for myself right here in my bed. And I started doing the breath work and lo and behold, I started to feel the exact same feelings that, we experienced in that center that night, which I don't know, it was cool for me because sometimes you do these things and you think, well, I'll only feel that way when I'm there. But to be able to take it home and just lay in my own bed and practice it, I don't know, something about that felt pretty cool.
Did you put on Tupac while you were doing it?
No, I didn't have any music on. I was actually like really having trouble sleeping. And so I was like, well, let me try this. And it worked.
I love that. I like to incorporate some hip hop into my stuff.
You do?
That was kind of interesting though, too, because the generalization, as I was talking about before with some of the yoga things, when I've experienced some negative situations afterwards, I can just stop and take a nice deep breath in, just take all that negativity in and breathe it out and just kind of feel that tranquility come back over me again.
Right. I mean, your prana, so breath work is known as pranayama. It's the practice of your life force. Prana is life force. And you're oxygenating your blood. I mean, how are you not going to feel more vital? But there's just so much other science that goes into it. It's fascinating and very effective. And you can do it every day. You can do 5 minutes and you can pause, do the breath work in that pause of the emotionality and do exactly what you're saying. It's just, if you can add the intention in it. So where there's intentionality is where that alchemy can really occur.
Okay. Can I ask you a couple of questions? Some of the things that where I struggle sometimes is I get a little too hung up on the way it's supposed to be rather than just using the tool for the way it works for me. And so are you suggesting like, if I want to do this shamanic breath work, 5 minutes a day for me that's absolutely adequate and fine and go for it. There's no harm, no foul there. It doesn't need to be in a setting. I don't have to have a primal scream and all of the things that we did in the class.
Nope. So there's a couple of great podcasts that I have with Patricia Anderson, and she's a Nam yoga teacher, which is kind of what I was talking about with this. Like, just
listen to that one.
Yeah. So she's got some incredible tools out there for free. There's links in the bio and stuff with incredible little snippets of things and ways you can fit it in with a busy family life. It's so, so helpful. And it's been something that I've used. Be sitting at the carpool line. I know I've got a 13-year-old girl right now and I've got to get my A game on. Like, it's it's no joke. You got to get in the right vibration. Otherwise things are going sideways for a week. So this is part of the practice. You fit it in, you work it in, you do some little 5-minute things all throughout the day. It's with regards to breath work. Yeah, definitely. It's one of the things I utilize.
Cool. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast today. Is there anything, Dave, that you feel like you've left off the table or left on the table or whatever I mean to say there?
I feel like we've completed the cycle.
Me too. Lauren, thank you so much for coming on and joining us. I'm telling you, everybody, go check out this podcast, NurishU with Lauren Bernard. It is absolutely freaking fantastic. She's got great guests. If you're into any of the stuff we talked about today, like taking that deeper dive into anger, what is yoga and how can you use it? What are some really incredible recipes? The shamanic breath work, you literally touch on all of the different things. And you've done a great job with this podcast. So bravo.
I got to go check it out.
You do have to check it out. It's good. Yeah, it's
Thank
good.
you so much in all of your support and getting it rolling.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
So much for taking the time to talk to me and have the interest. It was a lot of fun talking to you guys today.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Thank you guys for being a part of Learn from People Who Lived It. We'll see you next week.
We have 3 goals with Learn from People Who Lived It. 1. To help you feel less alone. 2. Encourage you to seek out a coach, a therapist, a church, anyone who can help you get through your journey and find some healing. 3. When you're ready, share your story with us.
Find Learn from People Who Lived It wherever you get podcasts. Search it using all one word. Learn from People Who Lived It.
So when I was in my retreat, I remember my instructor, my guru, my healer, I don't know, you call him whatever you want. But I remember him telling me that whatever I was getting ready to go through, because I was literally getting ready to blow up my life. I was getting ready to leave my career, which was going to put my family in a really wild place. It was just going to shake up almost everything that we had known, right? And he told me this. He said, Matthew, you need to make sure that you move through this in the highest way. And I asked him to break that down just a little bit. And what he told me was that I needed to make sure that I did this with the least amount of collateral damage. To put it very, very, very simply. Obviously, we were talking for hours upon hours on this whole exit strategy, but that's it in a nutshell. And all too often when we decide in life that we want to make changes, we seemingly don't care about the collateral damage, the people that we're going to affect, the people that we may hurt, the people that, this is going to impact. And I really am so happy that he challenged me to move through it in the highest way. Because while I can tell you that, of course, the kids took their hits, my wife took her hits, all of it took hits for sure. It still feels good. And it still feels like I made the right move every single day of my life. And I love that. It's a really good grounded feeling and space to be able to sit in. And so my challenge to you, I think, is that if you're going through something difficult and you're really moving through a tough season right now, just do your best to move through it in the highest way possible for everybody else, but most importantly for you. Okay? We'll see you next time on Learn from People Who Lived It.